The orphans cried, "Santa isn't real," until a human soldier proved them wrong. The explosion took out the eastern wall of the orphanage at 4:47 in the morning. Corporal Dale Grover was already awake, sitting in the gunner's seat of a patrol vehicle 3 blocks south, when the blast lit up the sky in a pale orange glow. He did not wait for orders. He was out of the truck before it stopped rolling, boots hitting frozen mud, rifle up, eyes scanning the debris cloud rising above the rooftops. "Contact, contact, structure collapse, Sector 9, he called into his radio as he ran. His breath came in hard white puffs in the bitter December air. The temperature had dropped below zero that night, and the wind cut through everything. The building was a 4-story stone structure that had once been a school. The alien relief organization Velthari Aid had converted it into a shelter for war orphans 8 months ago, after the Korath advance had swept through the lowland settlements and left behind nothing but ash and children with no place to go. There were 63 kids inside, ranging from toddlers to teenagers, and 17 Velthari caretakers who looked like tall, pale-skinned herons with 4 arms and deep amber eyes. Dale hit the front entrance at a sprint, nearly colliding with a Velthari caretaker named Ossel, who was staggering out with a child tucked under each of her 4 arms. "East wing is gone," Ossel said in clip standard. "The internal supports in the east corridor are failing. There are children still on the 2nd floor. Our people cannot reach them. The stairwell is blocked." Dale did not ask twice. He pushed past her into the smoke. The inside of the building was chaos, dust so thick it turned his flashlight into a useless white cone, rubble waist-high in the corridor, the groan of stressed stone somewhere above him. A child was crying, high and sharp, somewhere ahead. He followed the sound. He found her near the base of the collapsed stairwell. A girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting on a broken chunk of masonry and clutching a stuffed animal that had lost one ear. Her face was streaked with dust and tears, but she was looking at him with wide, alert eyes. No visible injuries. "Hey," Dale said, dropping to one knee in front of her. "What's your name?" "Pira," she said in a small voice. "Okay, Pira, I'm Dale. Can you walk?" She nodded. He helped her up, checked her legs quickly, then lifted her onto his back. "Hold on tight," he said, "and do not let go." She locked her arms around his neck and he turned back toward the entrance. Behind him, another section of wall gave way with a sound like a cannon shot. Dust rained down. He kept moving. He got Pira out, handed her to Ossel, then turned back around. He made 4 more trips into that building over the next 30 minutes. By the time the Velthari emergency team arrived with their equipment, Dale had pulled out 7 children and 2 adult caretakers. He had a gash along his left forearm from a falling shard of stone, a bruised rib from where a beam had clipped him, and his uniform was gray with ash from collar to boot. He sat on the ground outside and let the medic wrap his arm without complaint. None of the children from the East Wing died that night. But the orphanage was gone, and with it went everything they had: their beds, their clothes, their small collected belongings, the decorated paper chain garlands they had been making to celebrate something that the Velthari caretakers had called the Human Winter Festival. Christmas was 4 days away. The emergency shelter they moved everyone to was a repurposed warehouse on the edge of the settlement district, a wide, cold, drafty space that the Velthari filled with cots and emergency heating units. It was functional. It was not warm in the way that mattered. Dale's unit was stationed 200 meters away, providing security for the relief sector. His commanding officer, Captain Lee Horn, had allowed him to check on the kids after his debrief. She was like that. She understood that soldiers were human beings first and assets second. He went that evening, ducking into the warehouse with a pack of crackers and a thermos of coffee for the caretakers. Ossel met him at the door. "How are they?" he asked. Ossel tilted her long head in the Velthari gesture that meant something between uncertain and worried. "Their bodies are intact. Their spirits are another matter." She lowered her voice. They were very proud of the decorations they had made, and several of them had written letters. Letters. To the figure, the one in red. Ossel's amber eyes blinked slowly. We had been teaching them about the human tradition. We thought it would give them something to look forward to. The older children have been explaining it to the younger ones for weeks. She paused. After the fire, one of the older boys told the others that it did not matter because the figure was not real anyway. Dale stood very still. "How old is the boy?" he asked. 14, his name is Cale. He has been here the longest, 11 months. He does not often speak, but when he does, the others listen. Dale nodded slowly. He stayed for an hour that night, sitting with the kids, learning their names, watching Pyrrha fall asleep still clutching her one-eared stuffed animal. He noticed how the older children sat apart from the younger ones, their faces closed off, their eyes carrying the specific flatness that comes not from cruelty, but from too much disappointment absorbed over too long a time. He noticed Cale in particular, 14, lean, dark-eyed, sitting on the edge of his cot with his arms resting on his knees, not cruel, not angry in any visible way, just done. He had the look of someone who had decided a long time ago that hoping for things was a waste of energy. Dale did not try to talk to him that night. He walked back to the barracks in the cold, and he thought for a very long time. He brought it up at breakfast the next morning, which in a military field mess meant a folding table, powdered eggs, and whatever the cook was calling coffee that week. "I need a few days of personal leave," he told Captain Horn. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. The threat level in Sector 9 just went up 2 points. "I know I'll be within the perimeter the whole time." He hesitated. "The kids at the warehouse. Christmas is in 4 days and they lost everything. I want to do something about it." Horn was quiet for a moment, then she set her cup down. "Sergeant Finch handles the supply manifest," she said. "And I don't know where Corporal Webb keeps disappearing to in the evenings, but I suspect it involves that Velthari woodworking workshop 3 blocks over." She picked up her cup again. "You didn't hear any of that from me." Dale allowed himself exactly 1 second of a smile. "Understood, Captain." That morning he started making calls. The network he tapped into was not official. It was the informal, invisible web of favors and connections that exists in every military deployment, the kind of thing that keeps morale alive in places where official channels move slowly. He called in 3 favors he was owed. He traded a box of premium coffee for 2 bolts of red fabric. He talked to Webb, who confirmed that yes, there was a woodworking space and also a 3D fabrication unit that the Velthari engineers had set up and were very willing to let humans use. He found out that Private Nora Cassidy, one of the younger soldiers in his unit, had spent 2 years working at a community theater before enlisting and could sew faster than anyone Dale had ever watched. He found out that a Velthari engineer named Thas had been studying human holiday traditions as part of a cultural exchange project, and had, in fact, already assembled a detailed reference archive. By the end of the second day, Dale had a team of 8, 4 humans, 4 Velthari working in a corner of the supply depot after hours. Ossel had given him the list of names, 63 children. He wrote them all down. He was going to need a lot of materials. Nora turned out to be extraordinary. She had the red fabric cut and pinned within 2 hours and was stitching by the 3rd. She recruited 2 Velthari caretakers who wanted to help, and by midnight of the 2nd night, there was a pile of small wrapped packages in the corner of the supply depot, each one tagged with a name. Dale and Webb worked on the structural problem. The warehouse needed something, some visual transformation that would make it feel less like a holding space. Webb, who had been quiet about his off-hours hobby, turned out to have a genuine talent with wood. Within a day he had cut and assembled a frame, and Thas had sourced materials that could be shaped into garlands, not quite like the paper chains the kids had lost, but close enough. Corporal Yusra Pierce, who had grown up in a family that took baking seriously, somehow produced cookies. No one asked where the sugar came from. Some questions were better left unasked. Dale himself worked on the letter problem. He had asked Ossel to see if anyone could remember what the children had written in their letters before the fire. Some of the older kids remembered. Some of the caretakers had seen them. He pieced together what he could: a small toy, a book, a pair of warm gloves, something to draw with, and matched each remembered request to a package. For the children whose letters were completely lost, he guessed as well as he could. Pira got a new stuffed animal that Thos had fabricated using a pattern from the cultural archive. It had both ears. He did not know what to do about Kale. He thought about it for a long time. On the morning of December 24th, he sat down and wrote the boy a letter, not as a character, not as a figure from a story, as himself. He wrote about the kind of things you only say when you're not pretending, about what it feels like to not believe in things anymore, and why that feeling makes sense, and why it might not be the whole truth. He wrote about the night of the fire and about how Kale had been one of the ones who helped carry younger children to the door, a detail Ossel had mentioned and that Kale himself had never brought up. He wrote that he was not going to tell Kale what to believe. He was just going to say that someone noticed, and that it mattered. He folded the letter and put it in a plain envelope with Kale's name on the front. No package, just the letter. December 24th arrived cold and clear. Dale showed up at the warehouse at noon in his dress uniform, which he had pressed with something close to actual care. Behind him came Webb and Nora and Pierce and Thos and 3 other Velthari volunteers, carrying things. The children watched from their cots as the adults transformed the warehouse over the course of 2 hours. The wooden frame Webb had built became the spine of a large archway decorated with the garlands. The fabricator had produced a string of small lights that glowed warm and gold and were powered by a portable cell. Pierce's cookies were arranged on a folding table that had been covered with a bolt of green fabric. There was a small structure in the corner that looked, if you used some imagination, like a fireplace, built from spare crating material and lit from within by a Velthari lighting unit that cast orange and red. The packages were stacked beneath the archway. One of the smaller children, a boy named Fen who was 5 years old and very serious about things, walked up to the stack and examined it with great concentration. Then he looked at Dale. "There are a lot," Fen said. "Yes," Dale said, "there are." "How did they get here?" Dale crouched down. "Someone brought them." Fen considered this. "The man in red." "Something like that." Fen nodded as though this confirmed a deeply held theory and went back to examining the packages. The distribution took a long time because Dale read each name aloud before handing a package over, and some of the children were shy about coming forward, and some of the younger ones needed help unwrapping. The Velthari caretakers moved through the room with an air of careful wonder, which was the closest their expressions could come to joy. Pira got her package early. She opened it and found the stuffed animal and held it up and said nothing for a long moment. Then she held it against her chest and went to find a corner to sit in and be quietly happy, the way children sometimes need to do. Dale saved Kale for last. The boy had been sitting against the far wall all afternoon, watching. He had not moved to join the others. He was not exactly cold about it, just separate, the way he was always separate. Dale walked over and sat down next to him on the floor, which was a thing that officers and senior enlisted did not usually do in public spaces. But Dale had stopped caring about that sort of thing around day 2 of this project. He held out the envelope. Kale looked at it. "There's nothing in it," he said, meaning no gift, which was obvious from the shape of it. "There's something in it," Dale said. "It's just not a thing." The boy took it. He looked at his own name written on the front. Then he opened it and read the letter slowly, the way people read things when they are actually reading them and not just moving their eyes across the page. Dale did not watch him. He looked at the room instead, at the lights strung across the beams, at the small orange glow of the mock fireplace, at 50-some children in various states of discovery and delight, at Nora laughing at something Pierce had said, at Ossel standing near the door with all four of her arms crossed in the Velthari posture of deep satisfaction. It was not a perfect room. It was a warehouse. The cookies were a little overbaked and the garlands were not quite even, and the packages had been wrapped in whatever material was available, which in some cases meant cargo tape and brown shipping paper. But it was real. Every part of it had been made by hand, in stolen hours, by people who had other things they were supposed to be doing. When he finally looked at Cale again, the boy had finished reading. He was sitting with the letter in his hands and his eyes were fixed on some middle distance, and his face had changed in a way that was hard to describe precisely. Not soft, exactly. Something more like open. "You did all of this," Cale said, not a question. "We did," Dale said, "a lot of people." Cale was quiet for a moment. "He's not real," the boy said. "The man in red, I know that." "I know you know," Dale said. "But you came anyway." "Yeah," Dale said, "we came anyway." Cale folded the letter carefully along its original creases and held it like he did not want to put it down. He did not say anything else for a while. He did not need to. Some things do not need to be said out loud to be understood. Fen appeared from nowhere, as 5-year-olds tend to do, and sat down on Dale's other side and began explaining in great detail the specific way in which his gift, a small set of interlocking building blocks, worked. Dale listened with complete attention, because Fen was extremely serious about building blocks and deserved to be taken seriously. After a while Cale got up and moved into the room, joining the others. He did not smile, but he moved. For a boy like Cale, that was enough. That was everything. Captain Horn came by the warehouse that evening, off the record, and stood in the doorway for about 3 minutes without saying anything. Then she went back to base, and the next day, filed a commendation for the soldiers involved that described the activity in the driest possible administrative language, and said nothing whatsoever about what it had actually looked like, which was 6 hardened military personnel, and 4 alien caretakers staying up past midnight for 3 nights in a row to make Christmas happen in a warehouse on the edge of a war zone. The commendation was approved. Nobody was particularly surprised. Ossel sent Dale a formal Velthari thank you message that was 17 paragraphs long and cited 4 different philosophical traditions. He read the whole thing. It deserved to be read. Pyrrha was still carrying the stuffed animal 2 months later, when the reconstruction of the orphanage was complete and the children moved back in. It had both ears intact. Cale enrolled in the settlement school in January. He still did not talk much, but he started helping the younger children with their schoolwork in the evenings, which was something nobody asked him to do and which he never explained. He just showed up and helped. That was the kind of thing he was, once he decided that showing up was worth it. Dale finished his deployment in March and rotated home. On his last evening in the sector, he stopped by the orphanage and said goodbye to the children who were still awake. Pyrrha made him a drawing. Fen gave him a formal handshake, which he returned with complete seriousness. Cale was in the hallway on the way out. He did not have anything prepared to say. He just looked at Dale for a moment, and then he nodded once, the kind of nod that means something specific between people who understand each other. Dale nodded back. He walked out into the cold night and got into the transport vehicle, and the settlement lights grew smaller behind him as they drove, until they were just a warm glow on the dark horizon, small and bright and real, the way a fire looks from a distance. The kind of light that stays with you.